Constructive Voices, the podcast for the construction people, with news, views, and expert interviews.
Hello, I'm Steve Randall and welcome to Constructive Voices for the first of our Focus on Female episodes. We're going to be hearing from some of those wonderful women who are making a difference in the construction industry, and we'll also be continuing our conversation, of course, about biodiversity, climate change, and various other things. Now, I'm going to introduce my co-host. It's not Pete the Builder, although he will be back very soon. It's somebody you've heard doing various interviews on the podcast. She's also the producer of Constructive Voices, Jackie Draper.
Hiya, Steve. I'm certainly not going to try and be Pete, even though I'm kind of semi-taking his place today. I wouldn't ever try and do that to Pete.
You could always go and do some of the dancing that he does on Instagram and things like that if you want to, sort of step into Pete's shoes a little bit. I'm very well, thank you, and good to have you on the podcast. Obviously, we hear you regularly doing interviews with our amazing guests, but I thought it would be great to get sort of an overview, really, of where Constructive Voices is as we head into the autumn months. I mean, it's been a really interesting focus on biodiversity, but we're talking about lots of things as we always do. So how do you see the months ahead unfolding, Jackie?
I have to say I'm really excited, Steve, because the evolution this year has been quite spectacular, perhaps slightly unexpected because of what's happening in the world, obviously, that everybody's aware of, with the need for biodiversity to be such a massive cause, obviously linked in with climate change. And we started off, as you'll remember, in January, we did at the end of January a round table around biodiversity within the built environment. And because the built environment is so responsible for, both emissions and lack of biodiversity, bringing down areas that have beautiful biodiversity for the sake of developments and so on, we feel that we're in an amazing position at this time to start to embrace some of those challenges. So, for example, we're working on the training that will be released sometime during September, which is called Beyond Biodiversity Net Gain. And this has been inspired by the law that comes into force fully in England in November of this year. But the reality is that we're very, very convinced that it will be an inspiration to people in neighbouring countries and hopefully eventually around the world, because we have such an amazing lineup of guests, and that was discussed in a fair bit of detail in episode 12 of series 2, which was myself speaking to Claire Wansbury and yourself, Steve, obviously doing the normal fantastic work you do. So it's been a massive evolution, and now Emma Nicholson, as you'll remember, obviously has been involved with us previously, has been interviewed previously, and has been a great supporter of Constructive Voices in various ways. So it's been a kind of a natural evolution that Emma would become a little bit involved. For those of you who don't know her, she's an award-winning chartered construction manager and chartered environmentalist with more than 23 years consultancy experience in the built environment, as well as infrastructure. She has an amazing network of people around her, and she's just a person who's, very supportive of all sorts of people within the related built environment industries. She's a very strong champion for sustainability, and she will talk to another wonderful woman who's an engineer called Kat Draper. Now, that will be the first focus on female interviews that we will be doing from here on in. So you'll notice every once in a while that there's going to be, sometimes we'll have a couple of them on the same month. Sometimes it'll be, we won't do one for a month or so, but it's something that we've been aware of, particularly with me as a female producer, that we have not focused on females as much as we would have liked to, Steve.
Yeah, and I mean, when we have had female guests on, we've had some great insights and a different perspective. I think, as much as men and women very often have similar views of what needs to be done with climate change and biodiversity and the other big challenges in the world, there's always going to be differences. There's going to be different ways of looking at things and different approaches, different solutions. And I think that's what is so wonderful. And very often the women that we've had on Constructive Voices on many different topics, but particularly on this one, they have a way of really highlighting just how important these issues are. And I always find it fascinating to get that other perspective.
I think it is, but of course I'm biased. I am a woman. But I think one of the things that comes across very strongly in this interview, so it's very important to mention, is Kat Draper is also a great champion of diversity in general. So let's not, go down the rabbit hole of like now we're suddenly just talking a little bit too much about females, but she's a great champion, as many other people are as well, of diversity within the industry and in general in her life. So she's an excellent, very precise speaker and lots of great insights in the interview. And I'm delighted that she's like, if you like, she's going to be that champagne bottle that we, bash off the side of the boat to start off this series of interviews, because she's a wonderful example. And of course, between herself and Emma, they are focusing a lot on the career of being a female engineer and what kind of inspiration she's had like along her career, how she would like to inspire obviously others and her work. And we talk, of course, about like the likes of biodiversity, sustainability. So it's an interview that's really packed full, I think, of many interesting insights for the audience.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think it's a really important thing that we talk obviously about biodiversity, but also we talk about that career path, because there has been forever a real issue with getting women and girls when they're at school enthused about careers in science, careers in engineering, careers in construction in particular, and to give some inspiration on that and to give some examples of people who are really, really doing it in a big way and have had a fantastic career and continue to move the goalposts. I think that's a really important thing.
I 100% agree with you, Steve. And without like giving the plot away, because we don't want to do that, but that one of the things that I think is also inspirational about Kat is she has been involved in a project that is in another country, not the UK, and that is giving back to the community. So she did that as part of the company that she's with. I will let her reveal that. But again, I think that's a very important in terms of like younger women looking to mentors. I think that's a very important ingredient as well, that not only has she got these amazing qualifications and career paths to date, but she's also somebody who appreciates the giving back is super important.
Excellent. Well, look, Jackie, it's been great catching up with you, and talk again soon.
You too, Steve. Fantastic to talk to you.
Thanks, Jackie. Well, let's hand over to Kat Draper in a moment, who will introduce herself and tell us more about her career journey. And our guest interviewer for these Focus on Female episodes, Emma Nicholson.
Thank you very much, and really appreciate this opportunity. It's going to be fantastic to hear from female engineers such as Kat Draper. So in order to introduce myself, just to say briefly, I am a chair currently for the Women's Engineering Society EDI Specialist Interest Group, and I've previously been a board trustee with the Women's Engineering Society as well. In terms of my background, I'm currently a principal sustainability project manager for a national consultancy and have over 25 years experience in the industry and have worked in project management and also sustainability, and as well as being a chartered environmentalist.
Hi everyone, so I'm Kat Draper. I'm a principal civil engineer working at Mott MacDonald. I've worked within the construction industry, specifically highways, for more than 15 years. And my most recent role is as design manager on a few different highway schemes.
Okay, Kat, first of all, I just want to say you've had a really successful and exciting career. Why did you pursue engineering as a career in the first place, and what motivated you?
Yeah, so I guess my strengths have always been maths and science, and additionally they're my interests. And I think a common trait for engineers is problem solving. So engineering seemed like a common fit really to do something that would apply that maths and science, but also introduce problems that needed solving in a day-to-day environment. So I specialised in civil engineering, which looks at infrastructure projects, finding solutions to problems. So they quite often work with water schemes or roads or rail, and I've specialised in highways.
What's been your career journey like so far?
So I took a fairly typical route. I studied maths and physics at A-level, and then went to university and did a master's degree in civil engineering. Having done a master's, I would have been eligible to complete that on-the-job learning to become a chartered engineer, but for various reasons I actually took a slight detour over the 15 years and did incorporated status first, and then later became chartered a few years later.
Just wondering as well, in terms of any particular skills that you believe are really important to becoming an engineer.
Yes, I think a lot of people will assume that you need to have some kind of academic strength, perhaps in maths and science, which is obviously true to a degree, but I think the key strengths is determination and passion. If you're determined and passionate to become an engineer, you can become an engineer. There's all sorts of routes through apprenticeships and on-the-job learning. That means you don't have to go to university, you don't have to sort of be amazing at maths. You can learn that and apply it on the job as you go. So yeah, I think the two main key things I'd say is determination and passion.
Oh, that's good to know. And also, what's the most interesting engineering project that you've completed to date?
So I've recently just returned from Rwanda. I was involved
Oh, wow.
in
Yeah.
a trip over there with as part of a team of 10, and we built a bridge to a community. It's quite a rural, isolated community that during their wet season they get cut off, so they can't access their healthcare. The kids can't get to school, and then they can't sell their goods at market. So we went in as part of supporting a charity, built this 77-metre long bridge, which will allow that community to have year-round access to all those facilities. And just seeing that direct impact, having it opened whilst we were there, has just been really, really great. One of the projects I worked on is the A428 Black Cat to Caxton Gibbet up near Cambridge. That went in for planning permission to the planning inspectorate in February 2021, and obviously it takes a couple of years to go through that whole process. But as part of the DCO consenting process, the planning inspectorate introduced a new requirement onto the project, which was that there was to be a no net loss of priority habitat. I think it was one of the first times that they've used a requirement in that way. And like you say, that kind of stipulation is going to be rolled in terms of a 10% BNG score. But as a consequence, that particular road scheme had to consider in more depth than perhaps historically what was its impact to the biodiversity in that region. So I think that change is happening. And then obviously going forward, it's going to happen more with this new legislation. I do think it's going to lead to positive change. So I do think there will be greater usage of things like nature basins, integrating the landscape design with your drainage solutions, increasing the use of SUDs. All of that will just drive a much greater consideration of the scheme as a whole, rather than just, will this road allow someone to go from A to B quicker? What's the actual consequence of the scheme, and can we make it a benefit to the environment? You know, we are in this situation where BNG, nature, carbon, climate, they're all interlinked, and you can't fix one in isolation. It's going to be an all-in kind of solution. We've just seen those extremes in the climate like we've never seen before, and we're beyond the crunch point, let's be honest, but we're at a point where we can still try to make change. So I think part of finding those solutions is just ensuring and recognizing that we do need a diverse workforce to offer those diverse answers and find those solutions. I'd like to think that in certainly 10 years, in a year, we'd have more recognition and more ability to make positive change within schemes.
Yeah, definitely. What's the biggest challenge that you've ever faced as an engineer?
So I guess on a personal level, it would have been taking time out and then returning from maternity leave, trying to recognise you've had this gap of time out of an industry and you come and step back in. Change obviously does happen, and obviously you've then got conflicting considerations and factors on your own time that you didn't have before, you know. So yeah, that was definitely a challenge to try and reassess all your priorities and then manage those, and then try and get your head around what's changed in the industry over the last sort of 10 months, and how do you fit back in to that bigger picture.
What do you particularly enjoy about the engineering field? What really inspires you the most?
I think just because every day is different. You know, I've worked in highways projects, and you might think that every highway project is going to be the same. And there's aspects which are the same, but every little aspect is then slightly different, or you get new problems that you have to face. And that kind of variance just really keeps the area and the engineering field interesting. And then in terms of inspiration, just that variance just keeps you thinking about what's going to happen next. And all these changes are things like, your BNG targets and your consideration of carbon. They're all new factors that just always create that need to change and upskill and just continue development.
You're a woman who's been in the industry quite some time. How have you found it working in the field of engineering?
Yeah, I think largely it's been quite positive. I think we can all recognise that there are barriers for women in the workplace, especially in engineering. And I think that's partly because, the world as we know it has largely been developed by men, and they don't have sight of things that women experience, then they're not women. So they just don't get that visibility. So it's not their problem to solve because they haven't seen it. So they just need that support to make sure that they can have it made visible to them. So I recently read an article that was titled "The Eco-Gender Gap: Why Saving the Planet is Women's Work," which sounds like an odd kind of title, given obviously we all live on the same planet. But what was interesting about it was that it sort of identified why women, to some extent, have a bigger consumer base that they can drive change. So it's often women who are still disproportionately responsible for the domestic duties, but it does mean that they source all the goods within a house, perhaps the food, the cleaning materials, and things like that. So they have greater consumer sway about what products can be purchased, even, for example, the carbon footprint of your food coming into the house. So that's something where women can really drive some positive change. And then within the sort of wider sphere, that kind of knowledge, I guess, can be applied to those infrastructure projects, and they can be more considerate to where are materials on site being sourced. Where's the work pool and resource group coming? Are they local? Are they going to be travelling a long way? Will they be flying in? Because obviously that's going to be detrimental to things like the carbon emissions and things. And additionally, women, whether by nature or nurture, tend to be more empathetic towards others and supportive and look to develop others. So they're more likely to challenge themselves and then the knock-on challenge others to actually think about the environment in a positive way and actually drive that change.
There's a shortage of females in the engineering profession. And do you think this is concerning? And what more do you think could be done to attract women in the industry?
Yeah, so I do think it is concerning. I think there's around 12% of engineers that are female, which doesn't reflect the wider world. The wider world is roughly 50-50 men, women split. So I think in any industry, if you've not got that reflection in your workforce, you're going to end up with a skewed view, which means that you will have blinkers to certain areas. You won't be getting the best solutions. Women can play a really important part in changing the engineering world. Diversity in thought and experience enables diverse solutions. And the best teams will always have diversity. You can have different skill sets, different emotions, different personalities, and that will just provide resilience and balance to any team. And then in terms of attracting more women, I think there's a couple of different factors that are at play there. So I think at first you need to try and prevent the bias and discrimination that can happen. So I think statistics show that discrimination and bias starts becoming kind of recognised from around age 6, which is obviously really young. So to get in there quick is obviously a key aspect. 6-year-olds there at infant school. A lot of engineering outreach is probably to secondary school to try and get them into the world of engineering as a career, not necessarily to the infant schools where they're trying to paint that positive picture of not having that bias integrated at that point. And then the second, I guess, is just making sure we actually support women that are in the workforce. Research from the Royal Academy of Engineering says that 57% of female engineers drop off the register of professional engineers before the age of 45, compared with 17% of men. And that's obviously a massive difference. So there must be a reason as to why that happens. And obviously, I don't know the reasons, but I suspect a lot of them are linked to things like caring for younger ones, caring for older ones, all the additional pressure on women, things like menopause, any bias that is within the workplace. They all create these reasons for them to consider leaving and or having to leave. So that means that we need advocates in the workplace that can stand up and say, I acknowledge that there's a problem here. and we have challenges and we need to make change. And if, for example, that advocate sat in a room that they look around and it's all white middle-aged men, challenge themselves and say, we need someone else in here. We need different insights. We need new perspectives. Let's get them in this room and see what their views are.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a particular male or female in the engineering industry that's inspired you to date? And what was it about them or a project that they worked on that particularly impressed you?
Yeah, so in my own personal experience, there's been a number of people that have supported me and aided development. But I guess on a much wider scale, Marissa Mayer from Google has been someone that has persevered and dedicated her career to the development of others as well. She's one of the first employees at Google. She had a very successful time in Google, but whilst there, she started a mentor initiative, which has gone on to train and develop a number of other successful people. And I think that recognition that you should mentor others to support them and develop them has just been something that's really inspired me.
You're a member of the Women's Engineering EDI Specialist Interest Group, like myself. What area of diversity inclusion interests you, and what difference would you like to see in the industry?
Yeah, there's a number of subsets, I guess, for topics that women face within the workplace and challenges. You've got things from motherhood to menopause to gender pay and gender pay gap and things. But obviously, it's not only women that do face bias and discrimination in the workplace, whether deliberate or unconscious. We've got people of different races, ethnicities, religions, neurodiversity, sexual orientations. They can all be subject to those sort of unconscious bias as well. In recent years, been a really positive focus on neurodiversity and making that more visible and recognising that people are diverse in a neuro way. Everyone's got different strengths and weaknesses, and someone may not be best at communication in a big room of people. They might find that very uncomfortable and they might struggle with the loud noises and things around. But if they can get their head down and they're absolutely fantastic at solving calculations and can, give you your bridge calculations in an hour when it might take someone else 4, that's a strength, isn't it, that you want to utilize within a team. There's no point forcing them to have that detrimental sort of social interactions if that's not their strength. And I think that's something that can be supported in the workplace. There's recognition that perhaps you need quiet areas. Some people do need to work in a room on their own to focus. Others are happy in an open office environment, and that's not a problem. But just acknowledging that there is that variance just means we get the best out of people. So I think that's an area that has started to improve in the industry, and I think seeing that change demonstrates how the acknowledgement of an issue can drive that change. So seeing that continue to change over the next few years, I think it will be really interesting.
And that's all for this episode of Constructive Voices. Please take a moment to share it with others who may find it interesting. Follow or subscribe to get the latest episodes automatically on your favourite podcast app, and rate and review the podcast if you can. You can also listen to the latest episode by saying, Alexa, play Constructive Voices podcast.
Here's Constructive Voices. Here's the latest episode.
And on our website, where there's lots more information too. That's constructive-voices.com. Don't forget the dash. Until next time, thanks for listening. You're really helping us build something.